The morning Adanna ran from her own wedding, the whole kingdom thought she had gone mad. She burst from the palace courtyard with her white beads scattering like broken promises in the dust. Her wrapper tore as she ran, her feet bare and bleeding, her face wet with terror that made even the boldest men step back. Behind her, women screamed. Children pointed. The marketplace went silent as death. And there, at the altar, stood Obinna, the most beautiful man anyone had ever seen. He wore white robes that seemed to glow in the morning sun. His face showed only gentle confusion, like a wounded angel trying to understand why his bride had fled. "Adanna," he called softly, his voice like honey poured over warm bread. "My love, what troubles you?" But Adanna kept running until she reached the riverbank. There she fell to her knees, gasping, crying, shaking like a leaf in a storm. The villagers surrounded her. The chief's guards grabbed her arms. Everyone demanded answers. "Speak, girl," the chief shouted. "What madness possessed you to shame this good man?" Adanna raised her head. Her eyes were wild but clear. "If I marry him," she whispered, "blood will fall before sunset." But this story did not begin that morning. No, it began many months earlier, in the season when the rains were late and the river ran low. That was when Obinna first appeared. He came in a trading canoe, stepping onto the shore with a smile so gentle that even the most suspicious elders felt their hearts soften. He was tall and handsome, with skin like polished mahogany and eyes that seemed to see straight into your soul. Within his first hour in the village, he had helped 3 old women carry water to their homes. He bowed low before the chief and spoke with such respect that the chief's own sons felt ashamed they had never been so polite. By evening, the marketplace buzzed with excitement. "Did you see him?" women whispered. "So handsome, and so kind. Which lucky woman will win such a man?" Everyone was charmed. Everyone smiled when he walked past. Everyone except one person. Adanna, the quiet daughter of a widowed potter, felt cold each time Obinna's eyes found hers. She could not explain why. She just knew that something about his perfect smile made her stomach twist with warning. That night, as she fetched water from the river, she heard a whisper in the wind. "A smooth face can hide a hungry spirit." In the days that followed, Obinna won the village heart by heart. He gave new sandals to a child who limped. He paid the debt of a struggling farmer. He praised the women as though each one were royalty. Even Adanna's best friend Nkem laughed at her suspicion. "You're being foolish," Nkem said one afternoon. "The man is kind, he's generous. He treats everyone with respect. Why do you look at him like he's a snake?" Adanna shook her head. "I can't explain it. I just feel something wrong." "That's jealousy talking," Nkem replied. "You're upset because no man looks at you the way they look at prettier girls." The words stung, but Adanna said nothing. How could she argue with feelings she couldn't prove? Then Obinna gave Nkem a gift, a beautiful coral bracelet, red as sunset, smooth as river stones. Nkem wore it proudly, showing it to everyone. But when Adanna touched it, just for a moment, she felt a sharp sting in her fingers. The beads felt wrong, like they remembered sorrow instead of joy. That night, Adanna couldn't sleep. Something terrible was coming. She could feel it in her bones. By dawn, Nkem's cheerful younger sister had vanished. The whole village searched. They combed the forest, called her name until their voices went hoarse, prayed to the ancestors for her safe return. At noon, they found her at the riverbank. She was alive but strange. Her eyes looked empty, like someone had blown out the light behind them. She clutched mud in both hands and muttered one word over and over, "Obinna! Obinna! Obinna!" The villagers blamed water spirits. They said she must have wandered too close to forbidden pools. But Adanna noticed something else. The coral bracelet was gone from Kim's wrist. While everyone else tended to the dazed girl, Adanna searched the reeds near where she was found. Hidden in the mud, half buried like a secret, was a single red bead from that bracelet. But this bead looked different now. It was dark, almost black, as if it had been fed with something terrible. Adanna wrapped it in cloth and hid it in her wrapper. She wanted to speak, to warn everyone, but she knew the truth. Accusation without proof would only turn the village against her. That evening, as the sun set over the river, Obinna came to her mother's compound. He smiled his gentle smile and asked permission to court Adanna. If you're watching this video, please like, subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments where you're watching my folktale story from. I want to know how far it has traveled. If you were Adanna, would you have accepted his courtship to learn his secrets, or would you have refused him immediately? I want to know your opinion because every story is like a candle that can light the path for someone else. God bless you, and may wisdom guide your heart. Thank you for staying with me until this moment. Adanna stood in the doorway of their small compound, his hands folded respectfully, his voice soft as morning mist. "Mama," he said to Adanna's mother, "I have come to ask permission to know your daughter better. She carries herself with dignity. She is modest and wise. These qualities are more precious than beauty." Adanna's mother, worn thin by years of poverty and widowhood, looked at this wealthy, handsome stranger as if he were an answer to prayers she had stopped praying. "You honor us," she said, her voice trembling with hope. But Adanna felt no honor. She felt trapped. After Adanna left, her mother grabbed her hands. "Daughter, do you understand what this means? A man like that wanting you? We could be free of poverty. Your brothers could go to school. I could stop breaking my back over clay pots." "Mama, I don't trust him." Her mother's face hardened. "Don't be foolish. You're not a girl anymore. You're a woman with no dowry, no beauty to boast of. If you refuse this blessing, you'll regret it forever." That night, Adanna lay awake thinking, why would a man loved by everyone chase the one woman who feared him? Before dawn, she had a dream. She saw a tree in the forest, but instead of fruit, it dripped with bracelets. Red, gold, silver, each one crying softly. Troubled by the dream, Adanna slipped into the forest before the village woke. She walked deep into the trees where shadows gathered thick as smoke, where only desperate people dared to go. There lived Mama Adanna, an old diviner. Young people mocked her as crazy. Proud people called her a witch, but frightened people sought her wisdom. Adanna found her sitting outside a crooked hut, stirring a pot that smelled of bitter herbs. "You come because of the smiling man," Mama Adanna said without looking up. Adanna's breath caught. "How did you know?" "The ancestors whisper louder than you think." The old woman finally raised her eyes. They were clouded with age but sharp as broken glass. "Sit, child." Adanna sat. Mama Adanna cast cowrie shells on a mat between them. They fell in patterns that made the old woman hiss through her teeth. "Some men are dangerous because they are ugly," she said slowly. "But this one is dangerous because he is beautiful. His charm is not natural. It was bought. Every trusting heart he breaks makes his mask stronger, his tongue sweeter, his face more pleasing to foolish eyes." "How do I stop him?" Adanna whispered. Before Mama Adanna could answer, the fire in her hut suddenly died, all at once, as if something had blown it out from inside. In the darkness, the old woman's voice trembled. "He knows you have come." Adanna ran back to the village, her heart pounding like drums of war. She found Nkem by the well and grabbed her arm. "Listen to me," Adanna said urgently. "Adanna is not what he seems. Your sister didn't wander to the river by accident. That bracelet he gave you." "Stop!" Nkem yanked her arm free. "I'm tired of your jealousy, Adanna. You can't stand that he chose to notice you after he was kind to everyone else. You want to ruin him because you're afraid of happiness. I'm trying to protect you." "From what? From a good man?" Nkem's eyes filled with angry tears. "You've changed, Adanna. You've become bitter and suspicious. I don't even recognize you anymore." She walked away, leaving Adanna standing alone. By afternoon, worse news spread through the village. Adanna had been invited to dine at the chief's palace, an honor no stranger had ever received so quickly. The elders praised his humility, the young men envied his success, the women sighed at his fortune. Only Adanna stood apart, watching the celebration with dread in her belly. That evening, at the palace feast, the chief's daughter, Lyle, saw Adanna for the first time. She was proud, beautiful, and used to getting what she wanted. The moment their eyes met, her fate was sealed. Inside the palace, Adanna dazzled everyone. He told stories of distant kingdoms, sang songs that made women weep, and spoke of trade routes that could make the whole village wealthy. The chief leaned forward, enchanted. "Stay with us, young man. I will give you land. I will give you favor. Help us prosper." Adanna bowed deeply. "I am honored, my chief." Lyle, the chief's daughter, watched him with hunger in her eyes. She was used to men begging for her attention. But this man treated her politely, almost distantly, which only made her want him more. Her cousin, a sharp-eyed woman named Zara, noticed something strange. She watched how Obina's eyes moved around the room, studying every person like a hunter studying tracks. He noticed who had power, who had pride, who had weakness. As the feast ended and Obina prepared to leave, a palace servant brought him water in a bronze cup. Obina drank, thanked the man, and left. Moments later, the servant collapsed. Women screamed. The chief's physician rushed over. The servant's eyes rolled back, his body shaking. When he finally woke, he was babbling nonsense. 2 faces. I saw 2 faces. The man has another face underneath. The chief dismissed it as too much palm wine. But Zara remembered, and she began to watch Obina more carefully. Adanna heard about the servant's collapse and went to see him secretly that night. She found him in the servants' quarters, still shaken, wrapped in blankets despite the warm evening. "Tell me what you saw," she whispered. He looked at her with frightened eyes. "You'll think I'm mad." "I won't, I promise." The servant took a shaky breath. When I handed him the cup, I saw his reflection in the bronze tray I was carrying, but the reflection didn't match the man standing in front of me. Adanna's skin went cold. What did the reflection look like? Hollow, hungry, like something wearing a man's face but not quite fitting inside it properly. Grabbed her hand. "Please don't tell anyone I said this. I don't want to anger a spirit." Adanna left him and went straight back to Mama Urena's hut in the forest. The old woman was waiting, as if she knew Adanna would return. "You've seen enough to believe now," Mama Urena said. "But belief is not enough. You need proof. You need to know where his power came from." "How do I find that?" "Cross the river, go to the village he never speaks of. Ask the women there what they remember." Adanna swallowed hard. "Will they tell me?" Mama Urena's eyes were sad. "Some truths are so painful, people bury them. But you must dig them up, child, before he buries you." At dawn, Adanna and Mama Urena crossed the river in a borrowed canoe. The water was dark and still, like a mirror reflecting secrets. They reached Obina's home village by midday. It looked normal at first, children playing, men fishing, women pounding yam. But something felt wrong. The air was too quiet, the smiles too tight. When Adanna mentioned Obina's name, faces changed. Eyes dropped. Conversation stopped. An old woman selling peppers whispered, "Why do you ask about him?" "I need to know who he really is," Adanna said. "He's a successful man who left to seek his fortune, that's all." But her hands shook as she spoke. They walked through the village, asking carefully, gently. Most people said nothing. Some walked away. One young man spat on the ground and muttered, "May his name be forgotten." Finally, as the sun began to set, they found an old blind woman sitting alone outside a broken-down hut. When they mentioned Obina's name, she didn't flinch. She didn't look away. "Sit," she said. "I will tell you what the others are too afraid to say." She spoke of a young man who was once ordinary. Not ugly, not handsome, just a regular boy. But he was ambitious, hungry for power. So he went into the forest and made a bargain with something old and dark. He became impossible to resist, the blind woman said. But the power came with a price. The blind woman continued, her voice like dry leaves scraping stone. "Every woman he deceives feeds his power. The more hearts he breaks, the more beautiful he becomes. The more trust he shatters, the sweeter his words grow." Adanna's hands clenched. How many women? Too many to count. Some lost their dignity, some lost their wealth. One lost her mind completely and walked into the river. The old woman's face twisted with pain. "That one was my daughter." Mama Urena touched Adanna's shoulder gently. "How can he be stopped?" "Only one way," the blind woman said. "A woman he cannot deceive must stand before him in public and break the vessel that holds his stolen power. But the woman who does this must be strong, because his rage will be terrible." They thanked her and left as darkness fell. On the journey back, Adanna was silent, her mind racing. When they reached her village, everything had changed. Her mother's pottery stall was nothing but ashes. Neighbors whispered that Adanna brought bad luck wherever she went, and standing in the center of the marketplace, comforting her weeping mother, was Obina. He looked up as Adanna approached, and his smile was gentle as morning light. "Poor Adanna," he said loudly, so everyone could hear. "So much misfortune, but don't worry, I will take care of your family." That same evening, Obina went to the chief's palace. Adanna's mother told her later, crying with a mixture of shame and relief. He asked the chief for permission to marry you, her mother said. He told them he wants to restore our family's honor. He said that despite your slander, he still sees your worth. Adanna felt the trap closing. And the chief said yes? Her mother nodded. The wedding is set for the next full moon. The whole village is celebrating. They say you should be grateful such a noble man forgives your stubbornness. Ninkem came to visit that night, guilt written all over her face. Adanna, I'm sorry I didn't believe you. But maybe you were wrong? Look how kind he's being. He could have any woman, but he chose you. Perhaps he really does love you. Or perhaps, Mama Urena said from the doorway, making both young women jump, he knows she's the only one who sees through him, and he wants to silence her forever. The old woman looked at Adanna with knowing eyes. If you refuse now, your mother will be destroyed, shamed, impoverished, blamed. But if you accept, you step into the lion's mouth. Adanna stood silent for a long moment, then she spoke words that shocked everyone. I will marry him. Adanna came to her house the next day. In private, away from watching eyes, he leaned close and whispered, Have you finally learned to trust me, Adanna? His smile never reached his eyes. Wedding preparations began. The village buzzed with excitement. Cloth merchants arrived with the finest wrappers. Drummers practiced day and night. Even the chief contributed money for the feast. Adanna played her part perfectly. She smiled when expected. She bowed when tradition demanded. She let the women paint her skin with sacred patterns. But every night, while others slept, she and Mama Urena plotted. You need to find where he keeps his power, the old woman said. Every curse has an anchor, something physical, something he guards. 3 days before the wedding, Adanna finally got her chance. Obina's new compound was being cleaned by servants preparing for the bride's arrival. In the confusion, Adanna slipped inside. She searched quickly, quietly. His main room held expensive things, silk, gold, carved furniture. But nothing felt wrong. Then she noticed a door no servant was cleaning, a room they whispered about but never entered. Using a charm Mama Urena had given her, a key made from river clay and ancestor bones, Adanna opened the lock. Inside, she found horror. The room was filled with treasures that didn't belong to him. Women's beads, combs, mirrors, waist chains, wedding cloths. Each item carried a name scratched into it. Each name represented a broken heart. But in the center of the room sat something worse. A clay pot sealed with river wax, pulsing faintly, like it had a heartbeat. Adanna knelt before the pot, her hands shaking. She could hear something inside it. Whispers. Crying. The voices of women calling for help. She reached out to touch it, and the pot grew hot. The voices grew louder. She heard names. I am Chioma, I gave him everything. I am Amara, he promised me forever. I am Neka, he took my father's inheritance. Adanna pulled back, horror choking her. She ran to Mama Urena's hut and told her everything. The old woman's face went grave. That pot holds their stolen pieces, Mama Urena explained. Trust, dignity, life force. As long as it stays whole, those women cannot fully heal, and his power stays strong. Then I'll break it now, Adanna said. No, the old woman grabbed her wrist. If you break it in secret, he'll just create another. You must break it publicly, before witnesses, during a sacred moment when lies cannot hide. Only then will his mask shatter for everyone to see. When? During the wedding vows. When he swears truth before the ancestors in the river, that's when the vessel's breaking will have power. Adanna nodded, understanding. But Mama Urena's face was strangely sad. What is it? Adanna asked. The old woman hesitated. Then she spoke words that made Adanna's blood run cold. There's something about your father, I must tell you. Mama Urena led Adanna to a quiet place by the river where the ancestors were said to listen most closely. Your father didn't die by accident, the old woman began. He was killed, silenced. Adanna's world tilted. What are you saying? Years ago, before Obina learned to master his curse, your father encountered him in another village. Your father was trading pottery and saw what Obina did to a young woman, saw how he charmed her, used her, then disappeared. Your father tried to warn others, tried to expose him. And? Obina had him killed before he could speak. Made it look like bandits on the road. Mama Urena's voice dropped to a whisper. But there's more. Your father received a prophecy before he died. A seer told him that his daughter would either become the charming man's final victim, or the hand of justice that ends him. Adanna felt tears burn her eyes. So Obinna knows who my father was? I believe he does now. That's why he chose you specifically. He's trying to control the prophecy by making you his wife. If he marries you, the prophecy bends in his favor. You become his greatest victory instead of his downfall. Adanna looked at her hands. Her father's hands, hands that shaped clay into beauty. Then I will be his downfall, she said quietly. I will finish what my father started. That night she dreamed of her father. He stood by the river smiling and said only one word: courage. 2 days before the wedding, Adanna decided to test whether Obinna knew the truth about her father. She found him alone in his compound, admiring the gifts brought by well-wishers. Obinna, she said carefully, do you believe the dead watch the living? He turned, his smile still in place, but something flickered in his eyes. That's a strange question for a bride to ask. I've been thinking about my father, wondering if he would approve of you. Your father is gone, my dear. The living must move forward. Yes, gone. Killed by bandits, they said. Funny how bandits only took his life but left his money untouched. Obinna's smile vanished. For one heartbeat, his face was something else, something cold and ancient and cruel. Where did you hear such things? My father's name was Okazi, Adanna said, watching his reaction. Does that name mean anything to you? The mask slipped. She saw rage flash across his features like lightning. Then, just as quickly, he controlled himself. He stepped forward and kissed her forehead gently, tenderly. You've been listening to old women's tales, he said, loud enough for passing servants to hear. My beautiful bride is nervous. That's natural. But soon you'll be safe in my arms, and all these dark thoughts will disappear. He walked away, still playing the loving groom. That night, Adanna found a dead white bird on her pillow, a warning that the game between them had entered its final, most dangerous phase. The next morning, Nkem came to Adanna's house in tears. Her eyes were red, her face twisted with confusion and pain. I don't know what to believe anymore, Nkem sobbed. You're my best friend, but everyone says you're being foolish. They say jealousy has poisoned your mind. I'm not jealous, Adanna said gently. I'm trying to protect you, to protect everyone. From what? A good man? From a man whose goodness is a mask. Nkem shook her head and left, but she was torn inside. Part of her believed Adanna. Part of her wanted to believe Obinna. That evening, desperate and confused, Nkem went to Obinna's compound. She found him sitting in his garden, looking sad and thoughtful. Sir, she said hesitantly, I need to ask you something. He smiled gently. Of course, dear Nkem. What troubles you? Adanna, she says things about you. Dark things. She's been visiting the old diviner in the forest. She's been searching your house. Obinna's face showed perfect surprise, then hurt, then gentle understanding. Ah, poor Adanna. I think she's overwhelmed by the attention. Some women, when they're not used to being chosen, become suspicious of blessings. So you're not angry with her? How could I be angry? I love her. He sighed. But I worry she's been influenced by jealous people who don't want to see her happy. Nkem felt shame flood through her. Here was this kind man, and her best friend was spreading lies about him. I'll talk to her, Nkem promised. I'll make her stop. She left feeling righteous. Obinna watched her go, smiling. Then he called his men and gave them an order. Find the old woman in the forest, before dawn. That night, flames lit the forest edge. Obinna's men set fire to the trees surrounding Mama Orena's hut, trying to smoke her out. The old woman escaped, but barely. She stumbled into Adanna's compound at midnight, burned, bleeding, clutching her divining staff and one last charm. The village woke to news of a terrible fire. Obinna stood in the marketplace, his face grave with concern. Rebels and witches practice evil in our forest, he announced. We must be vigilant. We must protect the innocent. People nodded, believing him. After all, why would such a good man lie? That afternoon, Nkem came to Adanna, tears streaming down her face. I'm sorry, I'm so sorry. I told him you were investigating. I thought I was helping. But then the fire happened, and I realized. You betrayed me, Adanna said quietly. I didn't mean to. I was confused. Adanna looked at her friend, this woman she'd known since childhood, who had been tricked by a smile and smooth words. She saw the guilt, the horror. The understanding finally dawning. Help me now, Adanna said. Help me finish what you endangered. Nkem nodded through her tears. What do you need? Gather the women Obina charmed, the ones with the coral beads. Bring them to the wedding. Tell them to wait for my signal. Mama Urena, wrapped in bandages, spoke from the corner. There's only one chance left. You must expose him during the sacred oath, in front of everyone, or he will escape and start again in another village. The wedding day arrived with drums, dancers, and joy that felt like a beautiful lie. The whole kingdom gathered in the palace courtyard. White chalk marked the sacred ground. Smoke from ancestor offerings rose to the sky. Adanna wore the finest wrapper anyone had ever seen, but hidden beneath it, pressed against her belly, was the clay pot she'd stolen from Obina's secret room. Obina stood at the altar in white robes that seemed to glow. He looked like a god descended to earth. Women sighed. Men envied him. The chief beamed with pride. Only Nkem, standing among the crowd, watched with dread and determination. She had gathered the women as Adanna asked. They stood scattered through the audience, each one wearing the coral beads Obina had gifted them. The sky above was clear, but as the ceremony began, dark clouds gathered from nowhere. The elders murmured. Rain in the dry season was impossible. The priest called for silence. We gather to witness the joining of Obina and Adanna. Let the ancestors bless this union. Obina took Adanna's hand. His grip was tight. His smile was perfect. He leaned close and whispered so only she could hear. If you shame me, your mother dies before sunset. Adanna's heart pounded, but her face stayed calm. The priest poured water from the sacred river into a calabash. Bride and groom, you must each swear truth before the ancestors and the water. Lies spoken here will bring a curse upon your household. Obina went first. He spoke beautifully, his voice carrying across the courtyard like music. I swear before the ancestors that my heart is pure, my intentions honorable, my love for Adanna true and lasting. May the river witness my words. The crowd sighed with pleasure. Such eloquence, such devotion. Then it was Adanna's turn. She was supposed to repeat similar words, to accept him, to seal the bond. Instead, she pulled the clay pot from beneath her wrapper and held it high. I will not swear lies before the ancestors, she said loudly, clearly, and I will not let this marriage stand on a foundation of deceit. Gasps exploded through the courtyard. The chief stood. The priest stepped back. Obina's smile stayed in place, but his eyes turned to ice. Adanna, he said smoothly, you're nervous. This is natural, but don't embarrass yourself. Women of this kingdom, Adanna called out, look at the man you praise. Look at the gifts he gave you. The women wearing coral beads shifted uncomfortably, and Nkem nodded at them. Slowly, they began to step forward. He gave you tokens of affection, Adanna continued. But what did he take in return? Obina laughed, confident the crowd was still his. This is madness. No one will believe you. Adanna raised the clay pot higher. Inside this vessel are pieces of every woman you destroyed. Their trust, their dignity, their very spirits. She hurled the pot to the ground with all her strength. It shattered with a sound like thunder. The ground shook. A violent wind erupted from nowhere, whirling through the courtyard, lifting dust and cloth and screams. And from the broken pieces rose voices, dozens of them, crying out names and stories. I am Chioma. He promised to marry me, then disappeared with my father's money. I am Amara. He made me turn against my family, then abandoned me. I am Neka. He took everything and left me with nothing. The women who wore the coral beads suddenly collapsed. Then they rose again, memories flooding back into them. Memories that had been stolen, locked away, hidden by the charm. They began to shout their truths, their betrayals, their pain. Obina staggered as if struck from within. His perfect smile cracked. Sweat appeared on his forehead. This is witchcraft, he shouted. She's cursing me! But the priest, wise in the ways of spirits, brought forward the bronze wedding mirror, the sacred glass that reveals truth during marriage ceremonies. It fell at Obina's feet, and what the mirror showed made the entire kingdom scream. In the mirror, they didn't see the radiant groom they'd fallen in love with. They saw a gaunt man with hollow eyes like burned coals. His skin seemed marked with handprints, the fingerprints of every heart he'd exploited. His face was shadowed, hungry, ancient. The chief's daughter screamed and fainted. The palace servant who'd once collapsed pointed and shouted, "That's the face I saw. That's what he really is." Women who'd been charmed by Obina began crying out their buried truths. He told me I was special, then I caught him with my sister. He borrowed money and never returned it. He promised marriage, then vanished. Obinna tried to speak, but when lies left his mouth now, they twisted back on him. His lips cracked and bled. The chief's guards moved toward him, but Obinna roared with a voice that didn't sound human anymore. You think you've won? He pointed at Adanna. This woman belongs to me more than any of you know. She was always meant to be mine. The crowd went silent, confused, and Obinna, cornered and desperate, revealed the secret he'd kept for years. Years ago, Obinna shouted, his voice raw and breaking, I sought power from the forest spirits. They told me one woman born under the river sign would either destroy me or become my final conquest, the heart that would make me invincible forever. He pointed at Adanna with shaking hands. That woman was her. I've been waiting for her to grow up. I killed her father when he tried to expose me. I've watched her from afar, planning, waiting for the right moment. Thunder cracked overhead. The river behind the palace began to churn. If I marry her, Obinna continued, half mad now, the prophecy bends. She becomes my victory, not my doom. The ancestors promised me. Adanna stood tall despite her fear. The ancestors promised nothing. You made a bargain with darkness, and darkness always collects its debt. Mama Urenna stepped forward, supported by Nenkum. The trial must be completed. Let the river judge him. The ancient tradition was clear. When truth cannot be determined by words, the river decides. The guilty sink beneath its weight. The innocent float to safety. Obinna, mad with pride and power, believed his charms could save him even now. Fine. I'll prove my innocence before all of you. He ran toward the river. The crowd followed. Even wounded, even exposed, some part of him still believed he could win. He stepped into the water, and for a moment he began to float. His smile returned. You see, the river accepts me. But then the water began to churn. The surface reflected not his beautiful mask, but the faces of every woman he'd betrayed, dozens of them, staring up from beneath the surface. The reflections in the water spoke with one voice. You used us. You broke us. Now we pull you down. Obinna tried to swim, but the coral beads, the gold chains, the jeweled gifts he'd used to trap others, they appeared around his neck like chains, dragging him deeper. No, he screamed. I was meant for greatness. The spirits promised. The spirits lied, Mama Urenna called from the shore, as you did. The water rose around him, no longer gentle, but violent and angry. It pulled at his legs, his waist, his chest. In his final moment of desperation, he reached toward Adanna, his hands stretching across the water. Please, I chose you because I loved you. Save me. But Adanna stood still, tears running down her face, not for him, but for all the women he'd destroyed. You never loved anyone but yourself. The river accepted that truth. The water closed over Obinna's head. He sank beneath the surface. Silence fell over the kingdom. They waited, but he did not rise again. The river kept what it judged. Slowly the water calmed. And washing up on the shore came dozens of coral beads, the red ones he'd used to charm and control. But now they were broken, dull, powerless. The curse was finished. By morning, the riverbank was peaceful again. Obinna's body was never returned to the land. The river had made its judgment, and the ancestors had accepted it. Adanna stood before the village, no longer a bride but a witness to truth. The chief approached her, shame on his face. We should have listened to you, he said. We were blinded by charm and ignored wisdom. The women who had suffered under Obinna began to reclaim their voices. They spoke their stories openly now. They comforted each other. They healed. Nkem embraced Adanna, both of them crying. I'm sorry I doubted you. You believed in the end, Adanna said. That's what matters. The chief offered Adanna a place in the palace, wealth, and status, but she refused. I don't want rewards for doing what was right. I want to go home and rebuild my mother's house. Mama Urenna blessed her before the whole kingdom. Let this be a lesson for all generations. Fear not the man who is rough but honest. Fear the one whose sweetness hides a hungry spirit. She turned to the crowd. A smooth tongue can speak lies. A gentle face can hide cruelty. Judge people not by their performance but by their character when they think no one is watching. Adanna returned to her mother's compound. She rebuilt the pottery stall with her own hands. She became known not for beauty or marriage, but for discernment and courage. Years later, young women would come to her asking advice about men who seemed too good to be true. And Adanna would always say, trust your unease. If something feels wrong, it probably is. Not every smiling face carries good intentions, and the most dangerous trap is the one dressed like love. If you're listening to this story, please like, subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments where you're hearing my tale from. I want to know how far these words have traveled. If you were Adanna, would you have had the courage to run from that wedding, or would the pressure have been too strong? I want to know your heart because every story is like a candle that can light the path for someone walking in darkness. God bless you, and may wisdom guide you to see beyond beautiful faces to the truth beneath. Thank you for staying with me until the very end.